Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
Nobody expected sparks to fly when Julia Roberts joined The View. The Hollywood icon, known for her warmth and poise, was invited to share her thoughts on one of America's most pressing questions: should Social Security be increased to match rising inflation? At first, it seemed like just another panel discussion. But the moment Ana Navarro pushed back with sharp political arguments, Julia's demeanor shifted. What began as polite conversation soon turned into a fiery exchange that had the studio audience gasping, clapping, and leaning on every word. Julia Roberts didn't hold back, bringing raw emotion and personal stories that struck at the heart of the issue. Ana Navarro countered with hard numbers, warnings about national debt, and accusations of Hollywood idealism. The tension climbed until the stage itself felt like it might explode. By the end of the segment, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a debate about Social Security. It was about respect, dignity, and whether America is willing to honor its seniors in the face of skyrocketing costs. The clash between Julia and Ana left the audience divided, social media ablaze, and millions asking, "Whose side are you on?" The bright studio lights of The View set the stage, and the energy in the room was unmistakable. Julia Roberts, dressed in an elegant but understated navy suit, smiled warmly as the audience erupted into applause. She waved gently, her movie star charm lighting up the room. Beside her, Ana Navarro leaned forward in her seat, ready to engage. Though polite smiles were exchanged, the air carried a subtle tension. Everyone knew the day's topic wasn't just surface-level Hollywood chatter. Sunny Hostin introduced the segment with her usual calm tone. Today, we're diving into an issue that affects millions of Americans, especially seniors. Should Social Security be increased to match rising inflation? The crowd hummed with curiosity. Julia leaned closer to the microphone. "You know, I grew up watching my parents struggle to make ends meet. They worked hard, played by the rules, and when retirement came around, they relied on Social Security. But today, things are different. Prices keep climbing, and what once was enough isn't anymore." Her voice carried warmth, but also a firmness that surprised the table. The audience nodded along, murmuring in agreement. Julia smiled faintly and continued, "I'm not an economist, but I do know this. Dignity in retirement shouldn't be optional. Seniors built this country, and it feels wrong that so many are forced to choose between groceries and prescriptions." Ana Navarro responded with a measured smile. "Julia, I admire your compassion, and no one here disagrees that our seniors deserve better. But Social Security is already on shaky financial ground. If we just keep increasing payments to match inflation without addressing funding, we're risking the entire program collapsing for future generations." The crowd reacted with a low mix of gasps and nods. Julia adjusted in her chair, maintaining her signature poise. "Ana, I hear you. But when we talk about future generations, I can't help but think about the current ones, our elderly neighbors and family members who are struggling right now. Inflation isn't waiting for Congress to balance the budget." Whoopi Goldberg, sitting in the middle, chuckled lightly to diffuse the tension. All right, ladies, let's not scare everybody just yet. We're just warming up." But the subtle tension lingered. Ana leaned in, her hands clasped together. "Julia, I admire you immensely. You're an icon, and your voice matters. But sometimes celebrities oversimplify complex problems. It's not just about raising payments, it's about where the money comes from. Do we raise taxes, cut spending elsewhere, or borrow more and leave the debt to our kids?" Julia's smile faltered slightly. Her eyes narrowed with thought, but her tone stayed measured. "Ana, with all due respect, I don't think this is about celebrities oversimplifying. I think it's about people forgetting that behind every number there's a human being. Yes, it's complicated, but if we can find billions for wars, bailouts, and tax breaks, surely we can find a way to let our seniors live with dignity." The audience erupted in applause, some even standing. Anna's smile stiffened, though she nodded politely. The opening act of the debate was set, one side driven by numbers and caution, the other by empathy and urgency. And though civility still framed the exchange, the first sparks of conflict had already lit the air. By the time the polite opening statements had landed, the audience could already feel the temperature in the room beginning to rise. Julia Roberts sat tall, her calm presence masking the steel underneath, while Ana Navarro leaned forward with sharpened intent. The smiles were still there, but the words were growing heavier. Ana was the first to push harder. "Julia, it's very easy to say, let's just increase Social Security to match inflation, but that ignores how the system works. We're already facing insolvency in less than a decade if nothing changes. If you keep promising more without reform, you're selling people false hope." The audience let out a low murmur. Julia's lips pressed together before she responded, her voice firm but still composed. "Ana, I don't think it's false hope to believe that seniors shouldn't be punished for living in an economy they didn't create. Inflation isn't their fault. They didn't cause housing prices to skyrocket or grocery bills to double. They simply trusted the system that told them, work hard your whole life, pay in, and you'll be taken care of. Now that promise is breaking." Ana raised her eyebrows and jumped in, her tone cutting but controlled. "And what happens when the system completely collapses? Then nobody gets anything, not today's retirees and not tomorrow's. You talk about dignity, and I agree, but dignity also means honesty. We can't just hand out money we don't have." Julia leaned forward now, her tone losing some of its Hollywood softness and taking on the edge of conviction. "Ana, with respect, that sounds like fear-mongering. We do have the money. This is about priorities. If politicians can pass tax breaks for billionaires or find trillions for military spending, then don't tell me there isn't enough for seniors. There's always enough. It's just a matter of who matters more." That line struck like a lightning bolt. The audience burst into applause, several people standing again. Even Whoopi raised her eyebrows, impressed at Julia's sharpness. Ana smiled tightly, shaking her head. "See, Julia, this is where I think your Hollywood lens comes in. It's not as simple as cutting one check for the Pentagon and writing another for Social Security. Budgets are complicated. And by the way, those tax breaks you criticize, they help businesses grow, create jobs, keep the economy strong. If the economy collapses, there won't be any tax base to fund Social Security at all." Julia's voice lowered, almost trembling, not from fear, but from restrained passion. "Ana, do you know what it feels like to visit a senior who skips medication because they can't afford both their pills and their heating bill? I do. These are real people, not economic talking points. And when you tell them they have to wait for some perfect fiscal solution, what you're really saying is, sorry, your suffering isn't a priority right now." The studio went quiet for a beat. Even Ana hesitated before replying, her tone now defensive. "I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying if we don't fix the structure, then in 10 years the people you care about so much won't even have the little they do now. That's the reality." Julia shook her head, the warmth gone from her face. "Ana, sometimes reality is what we create by the choices we make, and I don't accept the idea that the richest nation in the world can't protect the very people who built it." The escalation was undeniable now. Julia's words were sharper, Ana's rebuttals firmer, and the audience had fully picked a side, cheers growing louder every time Julia spoke, while Ana's points were met with more mixed reactions. Whoopi tried once again to lighten the mood. Ladies, we're not going to solve Washington's budget issues at this table." But the heat was already on. The polite start had crumbled. The debate had transformed into something rawer, more personal. The uneasy tension of Act One had officially burst into open confrontation, and it was clear neither Julia nor Ana were backing down.
The air inside the studio had shifted. The polite sparring of earlier segments was gone, replaced by an undercurrent of raw emotion. Julia Roberts leaned back in her chair, her hand clasped tightly on the table, as if grounding herself. Her famous smile was nowhere to be found. Her eyes were intent, almost burning. Ana Navarro, sensing the shift, tried to keep the upper hand. "Julia, with all due respect, it's a little rich to lecture working Americans about priorities when you've made millions in Hollywood. You'll be fine. You don't have to worry about Social Security checks. But real families have to think about sustainability, not slogans." The remark drew a gasp from the audience. Even Sonny Hostin's eyebrows shot up. The subtle jab at Julia's wealth wasn't subtle at all. Julia let out a slow breath before answering, her voice low but charged. "Ana, you're right. I don't depend on a Social Security check. But do you know who did? My mother." The studio fell quiet. Julia's voice trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the gravity of what she was about to reveal. She was a single mother in Georgia. She raised me and my siblings while working long hours, sometimes multiple jobs. And you know what kept her going when her health started to fail? Those Social Security checks. They weren't charity. They weren't a handout. They were the only promise she had left from a country she gave everything to. The audience murmured softly, leaning in. Julia's eyes glistened as she pressed forward. "I remember one night, when I was maybe 14, she sat at the kitchen table crying. Not because she couldn't pay the bills, but because she had to choose between her medication and groceries. And she looked at me and said, 'I don't want to be a burden on you.' That's the weight seniors carry when Social Security doesn't keep up with the cost of living. That's the humiliation we put them through." The room was frozen. Ana blinked, clearly caught off guard. Julia's voice grew stronger, steadier, each word cutting through the silence. "So yes, Ana, I don't depend on a Social Security check, but I will fight for the millions who do. Because behind every statistic you rattle off is a human being, a mother, a father, a veteran, a teacher who worked their whole life believing this country would stand by them. And when you tell them, 'Sorry, it's too complicated, the math doesn't work out,' what you're really saying is, 'You don't matter enough.'" The audience erupted in applause, some people even standing to cheer. A few older audience members wiped away tears. Julia sat firm, her jaw set, her voice unwavering despite the tremor of emotion. Ana tried to jump in, but even she seemed rattled. "Julia, I'm not dismissing the pain. I'm saying we have to fix the foundation so it doesn't collapse for future generations. We have to be practical." Julia turned toward her, her tone sharper now. "Ana, practicality without compassion is just cruelty dressed up as policy. And if we can't look seniors in the eye and say, 'You will be okay,' then we failed as a nation, period." The audience roared again, clapping and whistling, drowning out Ana's attempt to respond. Even Joy Behar, who usually jumped in to poke holes or add a sarcastic quip, looked serious. She leaned toward Ana. "You got to admit that was powerful. Hard to argue against someone's lived experience." Ana gave a tight smile, but her voice betrayed the frustration underneath. "I'm not discounting Julia's story, but policymaking isn't about anecdotes, it's about math. And if we don't—" Julia cut her off, leaning forward with sudden intensity. "Math without humanity is meaningless. Numbers don't feel hunger.
Numbers don't sit in the cold because they can't pay a heating bill. People do. Real people. My mother did. Millions of mothers and fathers do. And until we face that, this debate is just noise. The studio shook with applause, some people even chanting Julia's name softly. The camera panned across faces in the audience, moved, emotional, deeply connected to her story. Ana leaned back, visibly flustered, clearly aware that the room had shifted entirely in Julia's favor. Even Sunny and Whoopi exchanged a glance that said everything. Julia had struck a nerve that went beyond politics. Julia's final words landed like a closing argument. We are measured as a country, not by how we treat the powerful, but by how we treat the vulnerable. And if we can't even guarantee that our seniors can live with dignity, then what are we even doing here? The audience leapt to its feet in a standing ovation. Julia's hand trembled slightly as she lifted her glass of water, but her eyes stayed locked on Ana, daring her to dismiss what had just been said. This wasn't just a debate anymore. This was a reckoning. And Julia Roberts had turned the studio into a courtroom, one where the audience, the viewers, and perhaps even history itself had already delivered their verdict. The atmosphere inside the studio was electric, almost volatile. Julia's impassioned monologue still hung in the air, vibrating through the audience like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. The crowd's energy was squarely with her, and Ana Navarro knew it. Her jaw was tight, her hands clasped so firmly together on the table that her knuckles whitened. For a moment, she tried to smile through it, tried to maintain the composed pundit persona she had perfected for years. But Julia's raw emotional blow had rattled her, more than she wanted to admit. Ana finally leaned forward, her voice sharp. Julia, with all due respect, I am tired of being painted as the villain here just because I'm bringing up facts. Yes, your story is moving. Yes, your mother struggled. But we can't run a country based on emotion and standing ovations. If we increase Social Security without addressing the solvency crisis, we bankrupt the very system your mother relied on. How is that compassion? How is that leadership? The audience booed. A chorus of voices shouted back, "She's right!" and "Listen to her!" Julia didn't flinch. She tilted her head, almost pitying Ana. Ana, leadership is not hiding behind spreadsheets while people suffer. Leadership is finding solutions that honor dignity. We're the richest nation in the world. Don't tell me we can't afford it. Tell me we don't have the will. The applause came like a wave, loud, rolling, unstoppable. Ana threw up her hands. This is ridiculous. This is a talk show, not a charity telethon. We can't just clap our way into policy. Julia, you live in a mansion. You don't know what it's like. Julia's eyes narrowed. Her voice dropped to a steely calm that cut through the noise. Don't you dare tell me what you or don't know. I may live in a mansion now, but I was raised by a single mother who counted pennies at the grocery store. I've seen the struggle. And unlike you, I'm not willing to dismiss it because the math is inconvenient. The studio went silent. That line hit like a hammer. Ana's composure cracked. Oh, so now I'm heartless. Now I'm the villain because I care about fixing the system instead of pandering for applause? Her voice rose, sharp with anger. Whoopi raised her hand. Okay, ladies, let's try to keep it civil. But Ana wasn't listening anymore. Her face flushed red as she gestured toward Julia. This is exactly why I hate these Hollywood types wading into politics. You give these teary-eyed speeches, you get your standing ovations, and then you leave the rest of us to deal with the fallout. It's irresponsible, it's shallow, and frankly, it's insulting. Gasps echoed through the room. Julia leaned forward, calm but cutting. Ana, what's truly insulting is dismissing real people's pain as theatrics. You call it Hollywood, I call it humanity. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that says more about you than it does about me. The crowd exploded, cheering, clapping, chanting Julia's name. The camera zoomed in on Ana, whose face now betrayed pure frustration. She tried to speak over the noise, but couldn't. The audience had turned completely. Ana snapped. She ripped off her earpiece. "You know what? I don't need this circus. I came here to have a serious conversation, not to be turned into the villain in Julia Roberts' morality play. This is beneath me." She pushed back her chair, the screech of metal on the studio floor echoing through the tension. The audience gasped, some booing loudly, others shouting, "Don't walk away!" Joy Behar muttered into her mic, half in shock, half amused. "Oh boy, here we go." Ana stood, gathering her notes with shaking hands. "Enjoy your standing ovations, Julia. The real world is going to collapse while you're busy playing hero." With that, she stormed off stage, cameras scrambling to follow her retreat. The audience booed and hissed, the sound swelling like a wave chasing her out. Julia sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable, until she finally spoke, calm, steady, and resolute. "This isn't about me. It's not about applause. It's about the millions of Americans who don't get to walk off when things get hard. They're stuck. They're waiting for us to do right by them. And I won't stop fighting until we do." The studio erupted. Applause thundering, some audience members standing once again. The contrast was stark. Ana gone in anger, Julia left in quiet strength. And in that moment, the verdict was sealed. Julia Roberts hadn't just won an argument, she had defined the moral heart of the debate. The next morning, clips of the confrontation were everywhere. From cable news to viral TikToks, Julia's quiet yet firm declaration, "This isn't about me, it's about the millions of Americans who don't get to walk off when things get hard," was being replayed on loop. Social media platforms turned the debate into a cultural moment. Hashtags like #StandWithJulia and #AnaWalksOff trended simultaneously. One side praised Julia's raw compassion, celebrating her for giving voice to retirees who felt ignored. The other side rallied around Ana, arguing she had been ambushed in a Hollywood versus reality showdown. But something about Julia's words lingered longer than the theatrics of the walk-off. Her appeal to humanity cut through partisan lines. Seniors on Facebook shared clips with captions like, "Finally, someone speaking for us instead of at us." Younger audiences reshared the debate on Instagram and TikTok, marveling at how Julia transformed a policy discussion into a deeply human story. Ana, meanwhile, doubled down in interviews the following day. "I'm not going to apologize for bringing facts to a feelings fight," she snapped on CNN. But the defensive tone only fueled the perception that she had been shaken. In the court of public opinion, Julia's grace under pressure and her refusal to make the moment about herself was the lasting image. Even news anchors, typically cautious, weighed in. On MSNBC, one commentator remarked, "What Julia Roberts did was shift the conversation from numbers to people, and that's why her words landed." On Fox News, a host countered, "This is what happens when celebrities think empathy is a substitute for policy." But the audience reaction spoke louder than pundit commentary. Polls circulated online showed overwhelming support for increasing Social Security benefits among retirees and middle-aged voters alike. Julia had tapped into a frustration that was already there. She simply gave it a voice. And her closing line, "They don't get to walk off when things get hard," quickly became a rallying cry, printed on protest signs and tweeted by advocacy groups fighting for retirement reform. As for Julia herself, she stayed out of the media frenzy. When asked later about the viral moment, she brushed it off with her trademark humility. It wasn't about winning an argument, it was about reminding people who this is really for. That humility only solidified her victory, because while Anna's walk-off became the meme, Julia's conviction became the message. In the weeks that followed, lawmakers even cited the clash on The View as an example of public pressure shifting the narrative. A senator quipped during a hearing, "Even Julia Roberts knows our seniors need more support. What's our excuse?" The room chuckled, but the truth hung there. The debate was no longer abstract. And so the legacy of that day wasn't just another celebrity versus pundit viral clash. It was a moment where entertainment blurred with politics, where a Hollywood star reminded the nation that dignity can't be calculated away. For millions of retirees struggling to stretch their monthly checks, Julia's words didn't feel like a debate. They felt like validation. Finally, someone was standing up for them on the biggest stage of all. And for Ana Navarro, the walk-off became a cautionary tale. In the age of viral media, leaving the stage often means leaving the narrative behind. In the end, Julia Roberts didn't just win the argument. She left a legacy of empathy that outlasted the applause, outshouted the boos, and etched itself into the national conversation. If you liked this powerful moment, make sure to subscribe for more celebrity clashes, emotional showdowns, and unforgettable TV debates. Drop a comment below. Do you think Social Security should be raised to match inflation?